Welcome to Health Systems CIO's Partner Perspective interview series. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Today we're talking with Rob Johnson, worldwide VP and global head of solutions engineering with SolarWinds. Rob, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Anthony, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Looking forward to having a fun chat. You want to start off by telling me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, I would love to. I'll try and do it through the perspective of our customers, right? Specifically, the IT buyer, aka the CIO, and their team of IT practitioners, especially those in healthcare. They've kind of got multiple challenges to contend with. The top three typically too many software tools, constraints due to resourcing, expertise, and budgets, and then just that intense complexity and managing data across the multiple silos. So those challenges really are what drive our organization and what my role is all about. So SolarWinds gives companies worldwide, regardless of their type, size, or level of that complexity, the ability to visualize, observe, remediate, and automate their entire IT infrastructure, no matter where that infrastructure resides. So we've got about 2,000 people around the world maintaining the trust that customers put in us to provide them with the ability to unite what I'd call granular and accurate data along with actionable insights. And so that's so they and their teams can act on and stay ahead of these IT issues. And we help them get to resolution faster with a rapid time to value. And I just wanted to share a couple of sound bites with you. Like the market last year gave our CISO the CISO of the Year award. And there's about 20 other industry awards across innovation and services. And obviously we have our customer feedback as well. And these things for me just help validate the value of our IT management software. So when it then comes to my role has kind of multiple dimensions to it, probably three. One, I head up the solutions engineering group. This is an awesome group that's part of our go-to-market function. And it's a group of men and women that play a crucial role in bridging the gap between the technical solutions and the services that we offer, and then the specific needs of our customers, prospects, and partners. So if you think about technical expertise, customized solution development, product demonstrations, presentations, proof of concepts, technical validation, acting as that critical link between sales and the technical teams, and then the technical teams and our customer success teams. That's kind of dimension one. And then dimension two is I report into our chief customer officer, and so get the opportunity to partner across all the functions of sales, customer success, renewals, enablement, channel, RevOps. And our collective goal is ensuring an unmatched customer experience at every touch point, because that earns us the right to achieve our revenue goals. And then the final dimension is as a business partner to the other functions: marketing, product, finance, strategy, people success, legal. And that cross-functional collaboration is really essential for aligning and executing on the broader corporate strategy. So those dimensions underscore our commitment to driving excellence, fostering great partnerships, and leading our teams. And we're leading our teams to achieve our mission, which is, guess what? Transforming the way businesses are leveraging technology to achieve their success.
Okay, very good, Rob. Let's talk a little bit about healthcare. So obviously you're in a whole bunch of industries, probably all of them, as it were.
Yeah.
Tell me about SolarWinds in healthcare.
So yeah, I think my perspectives are multidimensional when it comes to healthcare. In the US, we stood up a dedicated healthcare go-to-market team, and I have solutions engineers in my teams across Europe, Asia, and the US, supporting customers in that particular market. But to your point, we cut across so many industries. Sometimes even we get surprised at the value that the customers are taking from our software. So if you think about those kind of multi-dimensional perspectives, CIOs in the healthcare organizations are telling us that like system availability is absolutely critical for them, especially in the ecosystem of the healthcare market. And so that reliability and that uninterrupted functioning of the IT systems underpin probably nearly every aspect of modern healthcare delivery, right? Be that patient care all the way through to operational efficiency.
So it's kind of interesting, right? You're in a bunch of industries, and you're everywhere on the planet, right? So you're all over the planet, and you're in a bunch of industries. When we talk about healthcare, um, things are specific to Europe, right? Specific to Asia, and the US is a very specific and unique market. So, any thoughts about the US healthcare market and anything specific? You do anything different there? Do you have a different approach, or does that sort of come down to the people in the US healthcare market for SolarWinds? You speak with them and work out the strategy for US, then you speak with your Asian folks, people in Asia to work out the strategy for there, because they're very distinct strategies, right? From both from regulatory reasons and the whole cultural issues and whatever.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you look at SolarWinds and the value that we bring across all the industries, our approach is very unique. Treat every customer as an individual customer. And from there, figure out which problems they need help solving. And then what that gives you using that approach is a really nice vantage point, because suddenly you bubble up all these different problems and all these different use cases into something that's actually quite strategic, because you're gaining insights from multiple perspectives and multiple lenses. So whether that's like the government kind of funded National Health Service in the UK, which is obviously slightly different, and some of the regulations there are slightly different to the US. There are nuances around regulatory, there are nuances around people, there are nuances around process, there are nuances around technology. But if you put the customer problem at the forefront of what you're trying to address, the nuances you can handle as you go through building that partnership to solve those problems.
Right. Very good. All right. You mentioned system availability. I was just at a couple of the big conferences. There was one called Vive, which there was a conference. Then HIMSS had their big conference last week, I guess it was, or the week before. It feels like it was very recently. Um, and it's sort of interesting. You got a couple things going on in the industry. On one level, you have the current buzzword of artificial intelligence, which is a lot of people are talking about these days. You almost have on the other side, you have folks that are trying to sort of bring things down to earth in a sense, and keep things focused on what's important and what's going to keep the organization moving and the lights on. um, Not everybody can or should be messing around with AI. A lot of them are going to be sort of getting access to it or doing it, quote unquote, through their vendors. So there's really not much they need to do. But everyone needs to keep the lights on. And if you don't focus on that, if you start getting distracted by these other things, you can get yourself in trouble. So let's talk a little bit about system availability. Systems can become poor in terms of performance or unavailable for any number of reasons, one of which is a cybersecurity incident, a ransomware event. That's its whole specific topic to focus on. But what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about the other reasons you might have system availability issues, where you can suffer the same problems as you would with a ransomware event or some sort of cyber event, and still have the major negative effects with your customers and users. So let's talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on system availability.
Yeah, we'd love to. We had a few folk over at HIMSS last week as well. So yeah, a lot of buzz there. And I find it really interesting, if I can just quickly share with you from the AI perspective. If you go back to like the 1970s, which is like almost 50 plus years ago, I can't believe it feels like 10 years ago. But if you go back to the 70s, like there was some really cool artificial intelligence, mini viable products, if you like, being put into that space. So one of them, the Harvard University, were looking to how do you diagnose bacterial infections and suggest antibiotics with dosages that are adjusted for the patient's body weight. And if you go back and look at those types of cool use cases, the challenges back in the 70s are very similar to today, because you've got trust issues, you've got integration issues, you've got integration into the clinical workflows, and then all the limitations in the knowledge. But some of those things have paved the way for a lot of other use cases that we see today. But interestingly, most of them are augmenting how work gets done. And for me, it's that augmentation of AI that, to your point, will deliver value into people's lives. And so from SolarWinds' product perspective, like our leaders are leveraging AI technology to augment how the work gets done. And across the whole IT stack, right, hardware, virtualization, storage, operating systems, middleware, runtime systems, you name it, right? Everything that's critical in the overall functionality and performance of the IT ecosystem. So understanding and being able to manage that full IT stack is essential to keep healthcare operating, especially if you're a CIO of a healthcare organization. Like, the complexity and criticality of the infrastructure are so much higher. You need to visualize and understand how these systems, like your patient portals and your telemedicine platforms and your billing software and your electronic health records, are all interconnected. And so that visualization helps in understanding how those things interconnect. And then by observing that, you can see as a CIO how to identify issues before they escalate into something really critical that could affect patient care or operational efficiency. And so you're trying to detect and allow for these detections in a timely intervention. And so observing which resources are maybe over or underutilized, right? The CIO and his team or her team can make data-driven decisions about where to allocate or reduce resources. So this approach ensures that optimal performance of the IT system whilst managing costs and the other things effectively. And these are the things that CIOs in healthcare organizations tell us they care really deeply about. And so if you're a CIO and you can then remediate and take corrective action to resolve those issues or the vulnerabilities or the inefficiencies within IT, and then automate in line with the regulatory requirements, you can ensure that you've now got compliance. For example, login access to patient data and making sure that that's carried out consistently and accurately, so you can reduce the risk of like the non-compliance penalties. And so back to your original point, if a CIO is struggling to keep the lights on and maintain basic IT operations, like, it really does impact every aspect of their organization's ability to function. And I'd just like you just for a minute, just imagine just for a minute that you're a clinician, right? And you're working at a healthcare company, Anthony, and the CIO wakes up and literally turns the light off. And I mean like completely off. You as the clinician, you turn up, you arrive to work, you find the electronic system for the patient check-in and scheduling is down. The staff on reception are resorting to paper-based systems, which is causing delays and confusion. You're having to manually review the paper-based schedules, which are impacting your ability to prepare for the day's appointments. You don't have access to the electronic health records, so you can't review the patient history or the previous notes from the previous visit. And this lack of info is now forcing you to rely on what the patient's telling you verbally. If it's anything like me, you know it's probably going to be not accurate. So your day's not getting any better. Then you're trying to work cross-functionally with digital comms, but now they're all offline, so you can't consult with colleagues. That's impacting on patient care and decision-making. And you're having to result in using your personal phone, hoping you've remembered to put your colleagues' numbers in, but guess what? Your mobile's no longer working. So now you're having to physically walk to other departments, which, whilst healthy for you, is hugely inefficient for patient care. And then you have all these notes that are written by hand. You know that that's increasing the potential for errors. You're also aware you're going to have to be the one that digitizes them back when the systems are back online. And so all of these things are going on, and you haven't even kind of got to your lunchtime yet. Then you get past lunchtime and you find you can't prescribe medicine because you can't access the electronic prescription system. So you're writing down manual ones. You've got no idea if the patient's got any allergies, right? You've got no data other than you verbally asking them. So the risk of adverse drug events are now rising. And the patients, guess what, are getting angry, frustrated, anxious, right? Patient safety is at risk. Man, you get to the late afternoon, you're absolutely exhausted. You can't access the bed management system. You don't know who's being discharged today, and you don't know who's going to be admitted. So you are feeling really, really overwhelmed. And you get to the evening and you're completely exhausted, frustrated and concerned, and really worried about patient safety. And you're worried about the backlog of all that administrative work coming your way and the impact that's going to have on the patients and how they perceive you and your company, both in trust and reputation. So that sudden absence of tech, just for me, underscores the critical role that it has in today's modern society, right? The CIO's decision to turn the lights off highlights the importance of a reliable IT infrastructure and system availability, and the significant impact of the CIO decision on critical clinical operations and patient care. And just to give you a real example to reinforce this for you and the listeners, back in Feb 2024, there was a healthcare org in the US, and they had a cybersecurity incident. It had a widespread impact across the healthcare ecosystem. And that cyber attack led to considerable disruptions, to the point where pharmacies couldn't determine the charge for prescriptions because they couldn't access the health insurance records. So now, as a result, patients were forced to pay for the medications out of pocket, and some weren't even able to afford the costs at all. So I don't think it's just about system availability for your part of the puzzle and keeping your lights on for your organization. It's about working in the ecosystem and keeping the lights on for everybody, because there's never been more dependency within that ecosystem on one another's success.
All right, so certainly agree that we know that when the systems go down is a huge impact on the health system. Certainly, most likely a negative impact on patient care, almost certainly. We don't want that. No CIOs want that. Um, and we assume they're all trying to have their systems up and perform. So my question to you is, what are some common reasons that you might have network instability and thus application unavailability and things like that? What are some of the main reasons that we have these problems? And then we could talk a little bit about how to detect when we're having them, and then to remediate and fix it. But first, what are some of the reasons? Does it have to do with the way you've put your shop together, the way you've built your technology stack? What's some advice that we can give to CIOs about, hey, you really don't want to be doing this because this isn't going to work in terms of stability?
Yeah, I think there's three domains to explore, right? People, process, and technology. So let's start with people first. People make mistakes, right? Misconfiguration by IT practitioners, whether they're permanent staff, contracting staff, staff that have pulled in an outsourced service, right? They set up and do changes within change windows. And so at an infrastructure level, I'm talking about like a firewall setting. Maybe someone needs to, increase the security of the perimeter within one of the buildings, or maybe there's more people coming in and they need to increase capacity with the wireless access port, as an example, right? Those changes could lead to an outage or a performance issue because there's been some form of misconfiguration. So that's a people challenge. Under people, I'd also put things like, are your team updating and patching the firmware and the software regularly? Because if they're not, guess what? That's going to lead to some vulnerabilities, which could lead to instabilities due to known bugs, right? To your point, when they first designed and architected the system, did they think about the planning, the capacity planning, the disaster recovery, the redundancy, the failure to segment and protect the infrastructure correctly? Those are all things that you need to think about as part of your planning. Unauthorized changes, or maybe undocumented changes, it could also cause conflict that impact on the experience. I think you talked about it earlier. Phishing and social engineering can also compromise the network perimeter. I've also seen folks sometimes delete accidentally data that's really important, and which then disrupts the operation and leads to unexpected and unplanned downtime. And then there's events that you can't really predict. Someone spilling tea on a device somewhere, like improper handling of hardware. These are events sometimes that just happen that you can't foresee. And I've also seen, from a people perspective, people bringing unauthorized devices that then overload the network, which has huge impact on the performance of applications that are really critical and important. So there's just a few people ones. From a process perspective, I think I've definitely seen and heard from healthcare organizations that you've got to have effective change management, right? Approval processes, pre-changing, testing, all those things to mitigate risk before you implement a change. So if you don't have a strong change management process, If you've got a poor incident management process and your teams don't have a clear set of procedures for like identifying and reporting and resolving issues, I mean, typically your problems are going to escalate. I've also seen it where some companies struggle with standardization, sometimes because maybe they've grown through acquisition and they've got different iterations and different versions of documents and processes. But if they're not standard across the organization, typically that complexity and variability can definitely lead to issues, which are then very difficult in troubleshooting and resolving problems. Yeah, that's a few on the process. And then from a tech perspective, you'll probably have had this experience, but high volumes of traffic, right, impeding bandwidth intensive applications, overwhelming and slowing down, causing instability. Like a lot of healthcare orgs rely on technology and systems, and some of it may not integrate well because they're carrying legacy due to cost reasons. So sometimes you've got new solutions that can introduce and are more prone to issues. You've got outdated hardware, you've got security issues, especially as you pointed out, malware, ransomware, denial of service attacks that can all cause a level of instability or outage. You've also got a whole bunch of physical factors. Just think about like a wall, something as simple as a wall could lead to unstable connections, especially if you've got an over-reliance on cloud services. And then I think I mentioned human error, config error, poor maintenance. Like when you combine all those three things together under those three domains, you can quickly see why it's multiple dimensions of causes of network instability.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff in there, and I think you touched on a lot of really important things. Complexity and variability are the enemy of stability, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The concept of application rationalization is big in healthcare, trying to remove some of that complexity, right? Let's have a smaller number of applications we're dealing with. You talked about legacy technology, which another term is technical debt, right?
Yeah.
This is a big thing. We want to get rid of the technical debt, reduce variability, reduce complexity. All these things sort of, you could like have a number on it, right? You could look at a bunch of health systems and you could give each one, if you studied it enough, a number from 1 to 10 in terms of the higher the number, the more complex, right, the environment is, and usually that's going to mean the more at risk it is, right? The more sort of on a knife's edge you're dancing, holding everything together, as we say, with duct tape and a few staples. And you may
Yeah.
look at, I would imagine you could analyze the health system and say, oh boy, this thing is unbelievably complex.
It's a really complex ecosystem, and there's a lot of silos. And so if you think about the average CIO in a typical healthcare organization, not only have they got those challenges with the infrastructure and the people and the process and the technology, they obviously got their own teams. So just look at like a typical team, IT team, network engineers, sysadmins, database admins, security specialists. You're going to have health information technicians, maybe some health record specialists. You're going to have support staff, technical staff, software developers, engineering, analysts, maybe some data scientists. If you think about all those different people, and I haven't even mentioned IT project managers, so the people that do the implementation, or the help desk staff, or the strategy team, like there are so many roles that are all dependent on several factors. In smaller orgs, some people also have to do multiple of those roles, regardless of the role that they're doing. So the goal is to leverage to improve the healthcare delivery, but to do it in a way that absolutely simplifies the technology, simplifies the process, and simplifies how people collaborate and work together. Because that collaboration becomes very, very important. It becomes a cultural advantage when you have people that are naturally collaborating well with each other to solve problems that cut across multiple silos, like in these complicated and complex ecosystems.
So one message to CIOs and health systems may be simplicity, reduce complexity, that will sort of give you a better shot at network stability. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay, so you would say that would be one piece of advice too. You need to reduce the complexity of your environment. Um, what about tools that allow you to know when your environment is not performing as well as it might be, when users may be seeing a lower performance in the applications that you're providing them? Do you need special tools to see that? You don't want to wait for users to be having a poor performance and to let you know. Like, that can't be your feedback loop because many clinicians are very, very, very busy, right? They don't have time. They don't want to call IT and put in a trouble ticket. You need to know as the CIO, you need to know about poor performance from a source other than your users, correct?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to be able to create a great experience no matter what industry you're in. But obviously, in the healthcare industry, it's all about ultimately the patient and their experience. So everything that you're doing has to drive towards that. And customers and prospects from a tech perspective use companies like SolarWinds to get access to information like network health, system health, availability health, compliance, vulnerabilities, experience insights like workflow efficiency, incident responses. All of these things are helping build a great visual view, which line back to the experience that ultimately the end user is going to feel. So if you can put performance metrics in where you can see the response times, the uptime, and the throughput, you can identify the degraded performance before they're even impacting for timely optimization, then you're in really good shape. But let's not forget, this is a really difficult, complex environment, right, with so much inventory and so many moving parts. If you think about the industry and its rapid transformation, there's a bunch of advancements in telemedicine, as an example, and mobile health and other tech apps. But what that does is that expands the potential attack surface for cyber threats, because now you're having to secure the personal information and it's much more challenging. And of course, that patient data is not confined to a single repository, right? It's spread across multiple places. And so that decentralization makes it really hard to track and manage as well. And then you've got the regulatory, like the HIPAA landscape, which is constantly evolving. So navigating that regulation whilst ensuring you're compliant for a smaller company with limited resources is really tough to do. So you also got to make sure that you're training and keeping everybody aware of what needs to be a constant and what constraints you have, so you don't hinder the measures that you're putting in place, to keep your organization moving in the right direction.
So when you think about that visibility into network performance, you're talking about seeing if it's being affected by anything. But so you could see if it's affected by some sort of outage of a piece of technology you have in your stack, or if it's a cyber incident. So you're talking about regardless. You would have that window to see for any reason if the network is being affected, correct?
Yeah, what you're trying to do is look for pattern recognition and help the CIOs with pattern recognition. Like, so imagine you've got a healthcare org, they've got an observability tool to oversee all of its connectivity and performance of its critical systems. And let's include telemedicine, right? And you've got this tool configured to send alerts to your IT team. Let's say it detects that the response time from your electronic health record system exceeds a certain threshold. That might indicate a network outage or performance degradation, right, impacting. But it could trigger an alert one night where, upon investigation, the team say, well, actually, the EHR system is functioning normal. So now you've got this false positive alert that was triggered, and maybe it was triggered by a scheduled backup process that put some load on the network temporarily that caused this thing to spike and exceed the threshold. We see this happen a lot, right? So not only are you now wasting resource effort, you're creating alert fatigue to your team and you're disrupting your normal operations. So you've got to find a way to minimize this. And one of the ways you can do that is using machine learning algorithms, and you can use data analytics, and you can start to learn the normal behavior and the pattern over time. So that will include understanding typical volumes of traffic, response time usage patterns, and then you establish a baseline of what that normal behavior looks like for your system. which means you can more accurately differentiate between a genuine issue and a temporary one. And then with that baseline, you can employ anomaly detection algorithms that will then identify the deviated behavior. And then if you can correlate that event across all your different systems and data sources to pinpoint the root cause, for example, if the spike is response to the scheduled backup, or let's say another maintenance, the system recognizes that correlation, determines it's an anomaly, it's not indicative of a genuine network outage, then it can analyze the trends and patterns of the data. It can start to predict potential future issues before they even occur. And that for me is a beautiful example of where companies like ours are leveraging what I call AI ops, or AI for IT operations, because you're leveraging artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the big data analytics technology, and you're enhancing your IT operational process, which is exactly the goal of AI ops, right? How do you predict and prevent potential issues before they're impacting the end user? And so we're using AI ops to sift through vast amounts of operational data, which is way too complicated for humans just based on the volume to analyze quickly enough. And so these tools and technologies are helping us help our customers identify those patterns and anomalies and insights that ultimately come back to the CIO and the team making better informed decisions and using data to do that.
Would you say, this is my assumption, that most health systems of any size, if you have a hospital in your health system, are going to have some tool that gives them some visibility into the network performance? Is that safe to assume? Everybody's got something. So the
Yeah.
question would then be, what data, what insights is your tool giving you? Some are going to give you more than others, I would assume. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it becomes really important to be able to look at, I've probably got three things top of mind, right? So if you're at the C-suite, let's take security and compliance. Like, can you build a product that's designed to protect data and offer quick deployment to safeguard that data with all the IT features like event correlation and event management and reporting that's simplified to the regulatory compliance that you're under? Can you take your service desk efficiency and address any technical emergencies which are common due to the critical nature of healthcare, right? And invest in the products to connect supporting teams with the frontline end users, because that integration speeds up issue resolution. And then from a monitoring and performance perspective, there's lots and lots of companies out there that will offer niche specific products that are capable of monitoring some aspects of the metrics that you're trying to solve for. What we see and what a lot of our customers tell us is, hey, we've got too many. So now we've got this tool sprawl where we've invested in a siloed fashion, right, and procured multiple vendors to achieve different things, but we haven't holistically taken a step back and gone, hey, are the sum of the parts given us the outcome that we were expecting? So we get involved in quite a few discussions, typically where we look to maybe displace 8 or 9 other technology vendors to help the customer come into a unified dashboard across the entire IT stack. We recently had an example in the UK last month where a healthcare provider only displaced one other vendor because we were able to look at the entire IT stack and they were just looking at one portion of the IT stack, and they saved about £250,000. So like this, there's some really big savings to be had when you look at it from a full observability perspective, and you look at it from a, can I visualize, can I observe it, can I remediate it, and then can I automate it? And that's kind of what's driving our product strategy as a company, because customers are demanding that service from us more and more.
Yeah, so this is one area where you could wind up with a lot of point solutions if you're not thinking about it correctly. Patient engagement is another one that I've talked to people about, where you can wind up with a bunch of point solutions
Yeah.
if you're not, again, being strategic and trying to maybe go with a vendor that has more to offer. So that's one sort of dynamic that's going on. And around security, another dynamic is people are getting frustrated with the constant patching. It's almost like vendors can sometimes put out whatever they want because they know that they can just keep adding patches down the road. So get it out in the market, and we don't have to worry. We'll just keep on that patches. That puts a lot on the end user. It sort of puts all the onus on them to rush, constantly to do that. And so the opposite of that, what people want to go to is they want to put it back on the vendors in terms of security by design. Don't give me something with all these holes that I have to patch constantly. You do it on your end before you give it to me. So that's kind of a dynamic. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think I'll answer from like a SolarWinds perspective, and one of the reasons why I came and joined this leadership team. So, our CEO Sudhakar Ramakrishna, in partnership with our VP of Security, Tim Brown, and other senior executives, have been leading this partnership with leading cybersecurity experts like Alex Stamos, Chris Krebs. And what we've been doing is sharing our secure by design approach with all industries, and by releasing components of what we call our next generation build system as open source. And so this is a signal from us as a company to show the industry, right, a new model to help and prevent and mitigate cyber attacks and make it easier for our customers to avoid everything that you just said. And it's so important to us because we believe it's not a case of if you will be breached, right? It's a case of when. And I don't know if you're aware, but in the USA last year, there were 725 healthcare data breaches that were reported to the Office of Civil Rights. So that's exposing probably 130 odd million healthcare records. So if you think about that from a trend, 2023 set a new record for both the number of data breaches and the volume of records compromised, making it the most severe year for healthcare data breaches in the US. 99% of the breached records were due to hacking incidents. So that widespread impact of those breaches underscores the critical need to have enhanced cybersecurity measures within the healthcare sector. And healthcare providers and business associates and health people all suffered breaches, indicating that the cyber threat's a systemic issue that affects various facets of that entire healthcare ecosystem. And even more interestingly, that those breaches were broad, but also with HIPAA regulated entities in numerous states reporting significant incidents. So I think not only those breaches raised concerns about privacy and security of patient information, they've also prompted more regulatory action, which is why I shared earlier that the regulatory will continue to evolve, right? Because we're in a state of constant evolution in this technology world that we find ourselves in today. And so I think there will be a pressing need for the healthcare sector to adopt more cybersecurity practice and for the regulatory bodies to enforce stricter compliance standards to mitigate the risk for future breaches. It's definitely not going away. And what you'll hear is independent experts will note it's nearly impossible for any one company to stop a sophisticated and motivated attack. So it's something that CIOs definitely have to be aware of. And of course, penalties that come with it. I did some research just last week with some of the team. There was a huge penalty for one healthcare organization in the US where they had to pay a fine of around 1.3 million. So we're not talking small financial penalties here. We're talking huge, significant budget impacting penalties.
And was it safe to say that the experience your company had a few years ago makes you sensitive to this issue?
I think the experience that the company had a few years ago gives us a real opportunity to lead by example and share our secure by design approach with the entire industry and release everything transparently that we've learned. Yeah.
Very good. All right. I think this is we're just about out of time, but I would ask for your final message, final piece of advice to I frame it up this way. CIO at a 300 bed hospital system, community hospital, 300 to 400 beds. They've got physician practices and whatnot, some outpatient facilities. What would your best piece of advice to that individual who, maybe they've had a few network issues here and there. They've had a few calls from users. Hey, it's slow. It's not responding fast enough. Maybe the network's not perfect and they've had some indications that the performance isn't perfect. What would your best advice be to them?
Yeah, I'll give you two. One with a sales hat and one without a sales hat. So
At
sales,
least that's honest. Now, go
yeah,
ahead.
The sales hat would be, hey, today's fast-paced and ever-evolving landscape, our IT observability solution stands as a pillar of support for you as a CIO because you care about patient care, you care about operational efficiency, and you care about regulatory compliance. So partner with us and we will help navigate that future of healthcare together. And already our teams are helping CIOs in healthcare keep the lights on around the world and helping IT practitioners tap into that innovation, which will make delivering digital services way easier. That would be the first answer. The second one would be completely my personal opinion, right? Have a mindset of an assumed breach and zero trust. So zero trust models on the principle of verify then trust to prevent access. Assumed breach operates under the assumption that you will or you already have been breached. And what that does, by combining the two together, it will focus you and your team to minimize the damage and detect rather than solely just try to prevent going forward. It's about the readiness to respond and recover from the incidents that do occur. That's what matters most. And by simplifying and rationalizing your vendor landscape, you are taking risk out of your organization for all parties, not just your own function.
Perfect, Rob. That's great. Certainly compelling, that concept of, getting a bunch of vendors out, consolidating 9 to 1, whatever the number may be, reducing the complexity environment. Great stuff. I want to thank you so much for your time today, Rob. I think our listeners are going to enjoy it. You have a great day.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anthony. I really appreciate spending the time with you and having the opportunity to share some insight. So thank you very much.